Welcome to Hope is Here. My name is Greg Horn. We are continuing talking about playing hurt today. Basing a lot of this off a sermon by Reverend Wayne Smith, the founding pastor of Southland Christian, where he was there 40 years till he retired in 1995, and just did this every Super Bowl Sunday, tying it in with great illustrations of athletes that played hurt, but really the foundation was that we all play hurt, even though football players play physically hurt. Some of us play physically hurt in this life too, but a lot of us are playing with emotional heartaches and mental pain, and yet because of Jesus we can play hurt. And if you missed yesterday's, just kind of the foundation of why we're doing this program, I hope you go to our website, hopeisheretoday.org. That's hopeisheretoday.org. And listen to this 14-minute program. It's also available any place that you listen to podcasts. We're on all the major platforms. We're on Spotify too. And I want to remind you, we have a YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel that the majority of our programs are on. Sometimes we have some technical difficulties. As technology, can sometimes be challenging, but the majority of our programs are on there. And man, if you're on YouTube, I hope you'll take 15 seconds and just subscribe to our YouTube channel. That would really, really be an encouragement to me and the Hope is Here team. And just know that it'll help others find us. And we appreciate your support if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. Well, we wound up yesterday just talking about that even though when we're playing hurt and Satan's greatest tool is discouragement, and we want to sometimes check out of life, we just ended yesterday talking about how God wants to help you endure to the end. And in fact, He wants you to do more than endure. He wants to help to give you hope and be encouraged with that. And I'm thankful there's a guy that, he wrote more books in the New Testament of the Bible than anybody else. A guy that, personally, I feel like God used more than anybody else than His one and only Son, Jesus, and that was Paul. And Paul was definitely somebody who knew how to play hurt. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, Paul wrote in verses 1 and 8 and 9, said, "And since God in His mercy has given us this wonderful ministry, we never give up. Now we're pressed on every side by troubles often, but we are not crushed and broken. We are perplexed, but we don't give up and quit. We are hunted down, but God never abandons us. We get knocked down, but we get up again and keep going." Oh, friends, Paul knows what it's like to be crushed. And I know a lot of you know what it's like to be crushed. You're like, man, it's just taking all I have, Greg, to just carry on today. And friends, sometimes that's all you can do. But just like Paul, even though we get knocked down, we get up again and say, with the help of Jesus, Philippians 4:13 says, "I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength." And I'm so thankful, friends, that we don't have to rely just on our own strength. Romans chapter 8, verse 28. Sometimes, I used to doubt this verse, to be honest, when I heard Wayne share it when I was in college in my early 20s. He'd say, "And we know in all things that God works for good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose." When I heard that verse, I'm like, yeah, it's a great verse, but really, all things? But then when I went through the flood, bankruptcy, and divorce, I went from thinking, okay, some things work together for those who love the Lord, to then I kind of went, okay, well, most things work together. But after going through the flood, bankruptcy, and divorce back in 2001, and now 24 years later, I can sit here and tell you confidently, as you look at me, if you're watching on our YouTube channel, that not some things, not most things, all things work together for those who love the Lord and are called according to His purpose. And friends, He has a purpose for every one of us. As my hero of the faith, Wally Rendell, says, if you still got a pulse, you still got a purpose. And that could be to pray for people. It could be to send cards. It could be to be a phone call to people. Just call and listen and check on them. Then ask if you can pray for them. Friends, you might be limited physically, but you can still use your mind and your heart and your words to help be a blessing to others. And I really, truly do believe that verse now, Romans 8:28. Doesn't mean I like it at times, okay? I want to be honest about that. But I do know that I know when we look to God and say, okay, God, instead of why did you allow this to happen? And we ask, what is it you want me to learn from this? And what can I do out of this challenging situation to be a blessing to others and bring glory to your name? He'll use it, friends. But I know for some of you, you're just exhausted today. And I want to remind you that Jesus is waiting with you today with open arms. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, "Come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." I love that, friends. I've had to lean on that verse many times throughout my 50-plus years of life, and you can do that today. Well, in about 8.5 minutes we have left, I want to share with you 3 things that we must never forget. Number 1, you must learn to play when you're physically hurt. Paul, we talked about him earlier, 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 23 through 27, Paul shared, "I have worked harder. I've been put in jail more often. I've been whipped times without number, and I faced death again and again. 5 different times the Jews gave me 39 lashes." Friends, I want you to think about that. 5 different times he was whipped. And I love that the Bible's a book of details, and it tells the exact number. Each time he was whipped, 39 lashes. And you know why they stopped at 39 lashes? Because they found out, the Romans did and the Jews did, that 39 times was the amount that could cause excruciating pain, but usually the person would live for a while. And so they would be in tremendous agony, but they wouldn't immediately die. And so that's why they stopped at 39, even though it was just a horrific beating, a scourging, as they would call it. In fact, 5 times, can you imagine, even living through it once, but 5 different times after he healed up, then they did it again. So Paul knew about physical pain. Then, in addition to that, once he said, "I was stoned." 3 different times he said, "Hey, I was shipwrecked." Often he said, "I've been hungry and thirsty, and I've gone without food. And often I've shivered without cold, without enough clothing to keep me warm." Oh, friends, that's a lot right there. I mean, we all go through things, but man, the Bible, Paul, he's like, hey, I get it. I mean, sometimes when he'd be arrested, they put him naked in a cell, just, rock and just laying there. It could be cold, and they'd give him clothing, keep warm, might feed him, sometimes they wouldn't. And so Paul knows what it's like to be suffering. One of the things that Wayne did such a great job was sharing stories of athletes that played hurt. And some of you may remember the UK basketball center, Rob Block. I was fortunate that Rob became one of my best friend from college that I got to know. And Super Bowl Sunday back in 1988, a guy named David Robinson came playing with Navy. And David Robinson was, he's actually in the NBA Hall of Fame, 6'11", was just an amazing athlete, super strong. And he scored 45 points that day in Rupp Arena. In fact, Dick Vitale was doing the game, and even though Rob was 6'11", just as tall as David Robinson was just, one of the top 50 players of all time. He said, "Rob Block versus David Robinson, it's like Pee Wee Herman playing Arnold Schwarzenegger, baby." And, now it's funny, but at the time it was painful when I heard that later, and I thought about Rob's parents and family out in California watching this. But Rob did the best he could, and I think Rob actually went up with double figures himself. I think he had 12 points, maybe 8 rebounds. But people don't know early on in the game that Rob actually blocked one of David Robinson's dunk attempts. But David Robinson was so strong, it actually broke 2 of Rob's fingers. And Rob actually played the rest of the season with 2 broken fingers. They just taped them together. And it was the ring finger and the middle finger, and they taped those together. So quite often he would drop a pass on the inside or drop a rebound he got, and people started calling him Lob Rock instead of Rob Lock. And yet they had no idea that he was playing with 2 broken fingers. And so, sometimes, friends, when somebody's making mistakes, whether it's a professional athlete, a college athlete, or a person just at work or a family member, friend, sometimes, friends, it's because they're playing hurt. And so we just need to be really careful about that. Don't get me wrong. I know sometimes there's people with laziness and just not being mentally tough and making excuses. But quite often, friends, a lot of times when people are not doing things well, there could be something going on. If not physically, it could be mentally or emotionally. And it's always good just to err on the side of grace. But getting back to Paul, that guy we talked about earlier in the Bible, and we talked about how Paul knew how to play hurt. He went on to say in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 through 10, he said, 3 different times I begged for the Lord to take it away. Each time he said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That's why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, and in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So that last part again of verse 10 in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. For when I am weak, then I am strong. And friends, a lot of you I know, you're like me. You're like, yep, I've been there, man. I just was so beat down, but I just had to rely on the Lord and look to his strength. And his strength, I can say, was perfect in my weakness. And I learned that when I was weak, I was actually strong because of Jesus Christ. And, maybe you're where Paul was at. You just begged for a situation to change or be removed like Paul did. He said several times, I begged for the Lord to take it away. And friends, we don't know what it was. Some people thought maybe he was losing his eyesight. Some of them thought maybe he had a bad leg or had limp or something. And yet we don't know. But God, for whatever reason, didn't change whatever it was. Paul begged God to heal. And yet Paul said, God's power is made perfect in my weakness, and when I'm weak, then I am strong, and you can stand on that promise today too. Another guy that I saw that was amazing playing hurt, that had a great attitude playing hurt, was a guy named Cody Casey that played at Georgetown College football. I was a radio voice there back 2016 to 2018, and for men's basketball and for the football team, and Cody Casey was a freshman starter, defensive back. He broke his leg. But 6-7 weeks, I'll be back. Maybe get to play last couple games of the year. But 7 operations later, the doctor said, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to amputate your leg from the knee below, and he had to wear a prosthetic. So he thought his football career was at first, but he got a prosthetic. With the encouragement of his coaches and teammates, Cody came back and actually returned kickoffs for Georgetown College and was featured on ESPN and in Sports Illustrated. And he said, at first I was bitter at God, but then I realized I could have lost my life, and how can I bring glory to God through having to wear a prosthesis and through this amputation. So Cody Casey modeled what kind of attitude it is to have when we play hurt. The second thing, friends, with playing hurt, we need to play when we're emotionally hurt. John Maxwell says, life is playing a poor hand well. The greatest battle you wage against failure occurs on the inside, not the outside. Rick Warren said, other people are going to find healing in your wounds. Your greatest life messages and your most effective ministry will come out of your deepest hurts. Galatians 6:9 is the verse that really has helped me when I felt like giving up and I was hurting. Do not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time you will reap a harvest if you do not give up. And the third and final thing, friends, I want to share with you today when you're playing hurt. Remember, when you're playing hurt, your faithfulness to the game of life will be measured by your love. Wayne Smith said there's 2 motivators in life. One is love and the other is fear. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 13 says, now these 3 remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And friends, I've found, even though when I'm hurting and I don't feel like serving or loving, that when I do that, Proverbs 11:25 has never been more true. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. And know, friends, today that you can do that even when you're hurt. You can keep playing this game of life hurt. And you can model like Jesus, who did not come to be served, but to serve. Thanks for listening. If you've been blessed by these programs, I hope you'll share it with somebody else. My name's Greg Horn, and this is Hope is Here.